Jolie, thanks for asking me to present about queen rearing. I was fortunate enough early in my beekeeping journey to be taken under the wing of one of our members at Northeast Kansas Beekeepers Association. And I think it was my second year, and was shown how to graft. And it's probably one of the most rewarding things that I do. It's fascinating what these bees can do, given the right resources to do it. So I know some of you have been doing queen rearing for a long time, so I've already apologized that this may be rather boring for you, but I'll try to be just as simple and straightforward with what I do. There's other methods as well that we all kind of get to the same ending. So you guys may do things just a little bit different. I don't even think I was keeping bees when several of our club members went and took Marla Spivak and Gary Reuter's queen rearing little seminar or whatever that they had. I think, was that up in Minnesota?
Yeah.
Sure. I asked for the book earlier this past year when I knew I was going to be presenting, and for all practical purposes, I think I'm following along with about the same as what Gary and Marla do. So basically, what are we doing when we graft? Well, we're taking a young larva from—
Cheryl, can I interrupt just for 1 minute? I just had an announcement.
Sure.
We're talking about continuing these on past. We have them scheduled through May. And so if anyone has any suggestions for future topics, that you would like to hear, if you would put them in the chat box, I would really appreciate it. I'll write them down from there. And we'll just keep this going. It seems to be pretty popular.
Okay.
The confusion today is because we had over 500 people signed up in our Zoom, and it wouldn't hold any more names than that. So in the future, you'll get the email from me, but I'll send you the Zoom link instead of my link, so everyone doesn't come up as Jolie Weiner. So I apologize for that. Anyway, Cheryl,
Okay.
your go.
So we're taking very young larva that's from a fertilized egg, and we're transferring it into a manufactured cell cup with the same dimensions as that of a queen cup. So we're basically tricking the bees into thinking they're raising a queen. And so they will continue to feed this larva royal jelly as if it was a queen. The cells are then transferred into a queenless and broodless cell starter or a swarm box for 24 hours or thereabouts, and then they're transferred into a queen right cell finisher. Gilbert Doolittle developed this method back in the 1800s, and we still use this method today to rear queens. So what are the benefits of rearing your own queens? Can anybody tell me what they're paying for a mated queen from a commercial queen breeder this spring? Probably $40, if not more. I've heard quality issues, longevity issues with queens, availability as well as logistics. What's the quality of this queen when she arrives? Was she stressed during transit? Not that my queens that I graft are going to be any more longevity, last any longer, but at least I don't have $40, $45 in a queen, if that holds true. I can pretty much graft queens anytime in Northeast Kansas between early to mid-April until early July at the latest. Mated queens that come from southern areas like Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Texas, run a risk of having some Africanized genetics that I'm not going to have here grafting queens in Kansas. You know, the commercial queen breeders try to flood their drone yards, try to flood their drone congregation areas from drones from their own drone yards, I should say. But still, every once in a while, you'll get a spicier drone make its way through and mate with the queen. So you do have some higher risk of some Africanized traits. And then who doesn't need surplus queens or surplus nukes? We all can stand to have, you know, extras. Disadvantages in Kansas, Northeast Kansas, I can't have a mated queen to you as early as if you were to purchase one, because we have to have enough drones flying in order to get our queens well mated. And that's usually not until sometime in April. And so likewise, I have issues as commercial breeders do with mating conditions. Just the past couple days in Kansas tells you what kind of, you know, temperature swings and stuff we can even have in April. We can have rain, snow even, cold temperatures where she can't get out and get mated. Not to mention, you know, birds and that sort of thing. I bring up birds because last spring was so terrible cold and wet that we didn't even have our insect populations like we normally do. And so we had birds camped out on top of a lot of our hives, just, you know, enjoying the buffet of bees. And if you were actually grafting queens this past spring, it was even more alarming because you were worried that, you know, the birds were going to take out your queen when she goes out for a mating flight. And even birds that are not normally carnivores will occasionally eat insects in the spring during breeding season. So if you didn't know that, you know that now. So, you know, we try to do as best we can to control the mating by managing some drone yards. Here in my own operation, I was just thankful when the queen came back and was mated. And I really didn't look at the drone yard per se. I'm starting to take a look at that now, but you know, artificially inseminating, Corey Stevens is probably the closest one in our parts that does that sort of thing, where he can actually really control the drone genetics on his queens. And the other disadvantage, if you want to call it that, I mean, takes a little time, and it is going to require some additional equipment, but not too much. At least if you wanted to get your feet wet, I wouldn't have you get everything. So that's kind of some pros and cons of it. I know this is a queen rearing session, but I do want to say a few things about nukes. Dr. Jamie Ellis at the University of Florida, he's talked at some of our fun days and always recommended a nuke for about every 2 production colonies. One of the more recent talks, I listened to him say he would suggest 5 to 8 nukes for every 30 production colonies. If you didn't hear Christy's talk this last month, she gave an excellent talk about making splits or nukes. And my presentation is going to kind of dovetail to that, in that you'll need a nuke or something to put these new queen cells into once you graft. So, you know, if you're not currently using nukes in your beekeeping operations, you really should. I keep grafted, young grafted queens in nucleus colonies in all of my yards, pretty much year round. And they can be used to replace a queen colony, I should say, when they fail to requeen after swarming, you could combine that new young queen and a nuke back to those kind of colonies. Or if you have any poor quality or aging queens in your apiary, you can use these new queens that you grafted for that. And then, you know, we have some beginning beekeepers out there, and occasionally they'll end up rolling a queen on accident, and I'll get phone calls. You know, you got any queens available? I get calls all the time in May after swarming episodes and the colony fails to requeen, or they just get a drone layer from, you know, a package or a nuke that they purchased from someone else, and they need a queen to replace that. So I get a lot of calls. And in Northeast Kansas, don't let anybody tell you you can't overwinter nukes. I have pictures here in the middle and on the right. That one was just taken just the other day. I'll overwinter nukes in a 5-frame over 5-frame configuration. And then I can either break those down in the spring into a single 10-frame and add a second hive body for them to grow into a production colony. Or like I said, we can use it for other issues in the yard. So I just can't say enough wonderful things about having nukes in all of your apiaries to help. Equipment. You'll need a grafting tool, and I still use the retractable Chinese grafting tools, but there's other hooks and even toothpicks that people used in order to graft. And then cell cups, I use the JZ, BZ cell cups with the stem on them. Those are the ones that are pictured in the very center there, the smoky colored. You can get them in all different colors. And then grafting bars and frames, you can buy the fancy 3-frame cell bar there. I would just, if you wanted to, this is your first time, I'd just use just a standard deep hive body frame without foundation, and you'll just take some wax and melt wax in that groove in the top of that frame, and you can just use that. And I've got pictures of that here as we go along. You can get somewhere between 18 to 20 across easily, just with using a plain frame. So swarm box or a cell starter is in the bottom right. I'm not a woodworker. There is some specs in Marla Spivak and Gary Reuter's book. I know Steve Tipton's made his own. This particular swarm box is available at Better Bee, page 32, if you've got this year's catalog. But I would have you kind of play around and do some grafting before you go to all the expense of doing a swarm box, unless you're going to try to make your own, which I don't know if you can do it for much cheaper. Steve probably can tell me. But basically it's a 5-frame nuke. It's got a sliding lid. It's deeper. It's got a screened bottom around it for ventilation. There's no entrance or anything other than from the top sliding lid. So it's totally enclosed when you have that lid slid shut. And then you're going to definitely need a headlamp, some sort of a light source with or without magnification to help you when you go to find that young larva. I have just a chicken incubator, has a heater and a thermostat, and that's just a place I can store queen cells once they're ready to be taken out of the cell finisher. And then the mating nuke that I just use a 5-frame nucleus colony, just a standard deep nuke. If you make additional queens that you want to sell, once they're mated, you may want to purchase some queen introductory cages. And then of course I threw in the queen candy that you'd have to make as well, but that's pretty much equipment in a nutshell there. And all of these are available, you know, through your beekeeping websites. The Chinese grafting tool is what's pictured in the bottom left. And they come in packs. Don't just get one. They come in packs like 5 or 10. So just get a whole pack, because you'll need them in case one of them breaks or does something with, you can choose. So hopefully over the past year, you've been looking at your colonies in your yards for one that you might decide you want to graft from. And that colony needs to be a strong, disease-free colony that's well fed, that's got a good queen, that's got a good laying pattern. Over the course of the year, has it produced well for you as far as honey production? How is it overwintering? That's a big pet peeve of mine. How well did it overwinter? Did it have sufficient food stores? Did you have to feed it all winter long? If you got bees, you got mites, but were the mite counts manageable? I wouldn't graft from a colony that had a 50 mite count. But you want your mite counts low and manageable of those that you decide to graft from. And then nobody likes to work with mean bees. So don't graft from a colony that's got, a feisty queen or feisty genetics. So just, those are no fun. So hopefully you've got a few of them, in your mind, and you can watch them this spring. And eventually I would have you put some 1-to-1 syrup on them when we get closer to time to graft. And I'll get to that here in just a minute. Before we go to make our finisher colony and starter colony, we have to have enough drones for our virgin queens to mate with. So I don't get anything started until I start seeing drones in the purple-eyed stage in all of my colonies, and even drones walking around. You'll always have a few colonies that already have drones hatched out and walking around on the frames. And it takes 24 days for a drone to emerge. And then it takes another 12 days on top of that for that drone to reach sexual maturity. So you're looking at 36 days from the time of the first drone eggs laid to even have a drone that a queen can mate with. And you want ample drones for your queens. So I don't even think about putting a cell finisher together until I start seeing this in all colonies across the board. And I look at the weather as much as I can ahead of time. It's always kind of a crapshoot, but you'd like to not get things going if the weather's not favorable for the next several weeks. So once I see enough drone activity, I will set up a finisher colony. I have done cell finishers in both a 2-deep configuration and a 3-deep configuration. Probably Marla and Gary up in Minnesota probably run 3 deeps in the spring a whole lot. So their setup was for a 3-deep configuration. But I've done 2. I think it just depends on, you want a strong queen right colony. This past year, I actually did a 3-deep configuration, but you can do 2 just as easy. But what you're going to want to do is get all of your honey and sealed brood and some empty frames in the bottom box and your queen in the bottom box. And then up above a queen excluder, you're going to want to put eggs and young larvae and older uncapped larvae and pollen and nectar up in the top box, no matter what configuration you use. So when I go to put these together, I go ahead and find my queen and I put her in a nucleus colony, or just a little nuke off to the side where she won't get injured. And then the thing I want you to do next is I want you to go through all of those frames and look for another queen. Yes, I want you to look for another queen. I know firsthand. And Larry Connor says that 10 to 20% of all growing colonies will actually have a mother and daughter laying at the same time. And so I grafted one year. I had a marked queen. I put her in the bottom box, put my whole cell finisher together, did my cell starter, grafted, cell starter for 24 hours, then transferred her into the finisher. And I go back 2 days later and look in my cell finisher at my grafts, and they're all cleaned out, slick as a whistle. Well, I had a second queen, and she was in the top box, and so she cleaned out every one of those larvae that I had grafted. So I'm just a word of advice. Even if you think there's only one queen in there, look for it. Don't assume that you only got one queen. And then you'll do this about a week or more ahead of your grafting. So right prior, the day before I graft, typically you'll go back into this colony, do another inspection. If you've got in the top box, if you've now got some capped brood, I would move it to the bottom where the queen is. And if the queen has laid up some frames and you've got eggs and larvae in that bottom box, then rotate those to the top so that you have just the eggs and open larvae in the top box. Now make sure you don't accidentally bring the queen from the bottom box up into your top box. You don't want her up there above that queen excluder, because that's where you're going to be putting those grafts. So, and then I add a feeder at the time that you set up your cell finisher, even if it's a week or 10 days ahead of time. You're going to put a top feeder. I like to use just a little quart jar with 3 holes to simulate a nectar flow. I don't want to put, a Miller top feeder or a frame feeder in there where they'll just plug up all of my open drawn comb. So just lightly feed with a 1-to-1 syrup. On the day of grafting, you're going to put a cell starter. And for beginners, I'll probably have you skip this altogether. I skipped it my first year or two when I started grafting, and I just had you graft and put it straight into the cell finisher to get an idea of what's going on with the bees. But if you want to invest in a cell starter or swarm box, then you can go ahead and do this next step, and they'll really jump on that larva by doing this. But I'll make my cell starter at the same day that I graft. I will typically have some other colonies in the yard that I will do similar to what I do with the cell finisher, in that I'll locate those queens in those other colonies. All I'm interested in is some nurse bees, and I don't want to accidentally shake a queen into my cell starter. So I will do something similar with some other colonies in the yard, putting the queen down below a queen excluder, and then bringing open larvae, open brood frames up into that top box. And if I find really good fresh pollen frame and nectar frames, I will make sure I got a couple of those up in that box too, so that when I come into the yard that day, I've already got nurse bees on open brood frames in a couple of colonies that all I have to do is open and shake the bees into the swarm box. I don't have to look for the queen. I already know she's down below on the queen excluder, under the queen excluder. And so I'll pick out frames of nectar and pollen even, and have them in those top boxes, so that it just makes it really easy for me to pull. So when I make the swarm box, I'll have 2 frames of open nectar and some nice fresh pollen that they've just gathered this spring. Before I do that, I'm going to get a package of sponges that's never been used, and I'm going to rinse those sponges, and I'm going to get them totally saturated, but not so that they're just dripping, but I want them really saturated. I'm going to put them in the bottom of that swarm box first. before I go to the colony and start shaking in bees and putting in frames of nectar and pollen. That will create some water if the bees need moisture, and it also helps with the humidity. And so you're going to need, I mean, 6 to 8 frames would be ample enough, nurse bees, making probably even a full frame with 3 bars on it. But I'm just going to have you graft just the top of a standard frame is all I'm going to have you do. So that should be plenty of nurse bees to get you started. Let's see here. This is just another picture. This is a little confusing because this picture on the right shows the grafted cells already in the center. But what I'll do is on the left and the right, I'll sandwich my graft in between the frame of pollen and nectar, and seal them shut. But the picture on the left is just showing just a pollen and a nectar frame before any bees or anything is shook in. But this one on the right shows the graft frame as well, which I'm not really to the graft part yet. But once you make this up, then I want you to carry it. Well, in the spring, I just put it in the garage. You want it in a cool, dark place because those bees will generate a lot of heat. So I'll just put it in the garage in a cool, dark place. And then I go out and get my larva that I want to graft out of my breeder colony. Okay, Nikki or Robert or Jolie or anybody who wants to use the annotation tool so I don't end up kicking myself out of the presentation, can you point to a larva on one of these slides that would be appropriate age larva to graft from? And I want something that's 12 to 24 hours old. Do you see anything that might meet that? Okay, Robert thinks that. Anybody else want to circle one? Anybody find their annotation tool? You want to graft, it's a first instar or 12 to 24 hour old larva. These ones further down that are big are they're too old. You need to have tiniest of larvae. They may line right next to where your eggs are. If you're looking at where all these eggs are, that's good. Thanks, Robert. You know, you want to pick those kind of larvae to graft. So I just wanted to get a picture so you could kind of see with the naked eye what we're looking for. Now, not everybody can graft like Jim Kelly from the front seat of his pickup truck with a chewed to perfection toothpick. So pick a place that's comfortable. Get a chair that's comfortable. Get a light source so that you can see down into the cell, so that you can see what you're doing. And I couldn't find a decent picture. This is about the only thing I could find using a Chinese grafting tool. But you want your colony well fed, so that breeder colony, like 4 days to a week prior to grafting cells from it, make sure you get a feeder on it. It'll make it so much easier. You'll have a nice bed of royal jelly under this larva, and it just makes grafting so much easier. But you'll gently slide that thin quill tip under the larva and carefully lift it out. I don't like when they talk about scooping, because you really don't scoop at all. You'll push that quill, push that tip down until it'll just automatically slide underneath that jelly, and then you can just lift straight up. Then when you get it over to your cup, you'll just push the whole tool down until the quill gets underneath that it'll flatten out, and then you'll push the plunger, and that'll push that larva off of that quill tip. So once you get those cells grafted, you could go ahead and push them into your cell bar, I try to keep a damp towel over my grafts. There's about 2 rows of grafts there on that 3. You can see where I've put in the wax along that last cell bar. I haven't even pulled it yet, but try to keep them covered and so that the larva doesn't dry out. And like I said, you could probably get, 18 to 20 cells across there. There's a couple other pictures of grafted larvae in those cell cups there on the right. So,
Hey, Cheryl, I have a question.
yes.
When you go back one slide, when you are inserting your grafting tool to pick up the larva,
Mhm.
are you approaching it from a certain side? Are you hitting it? I don't, might have to go back even one more to the one with the frame, but does it matter how you're scooping it, like from which?
I kind of come in from just like just like they show the tool there. You're coming in from the slot from a side, but usually when I graft, because of the angle of the comb, we usually turn the frame upside down. You'll see the top bar is down in that top picture over there. So, I mean, it's whatever preference, whichever way you've got to turn it so you can get your light source down into the cell. I lots of times turn the frame upside down. Like you see over here on the right, Steve Messbarger's grafting over here on the right, and he's got his frame upside down. You can see the top bar is actually the closest to him. If you have it really low angle, it helps you see down into that cell because they do tip upwards. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You think? So yeah, you're not really, you're just gonna press down. You're not press down, but you're gonna take the whole tool and push down until the quill will automatically bend and flex for you, and it'll slide under that jelly. And then you'll just basically lift straight up. You're not pushing on the plunger at all during this time. The only time you're ever going to finally push on the plunger is once you've got that tool, the quill pushed all the way down in step 4, and you have it laid. You got to make sure you lay it in the center of the cell, and you can't flip that larva over. It has to be in the same orientation, or it won't, they won't accept it. Okay. So you got to try to keep it in the center of the cell and in the same orientation. Here's a picture of Jim Kelly, and he's grafting from the front seat of his pickup with his handy dandy toothpick. I don't think I'll ever perfect that. I don't think I'll ever be able to do that, Jim, if you're on with that. I still use my Chinese grafting tool. I think it's the easiest. So
it is the easiest to use of all of them. I was going to say, if you have the toothpick or any of the metal ones, the best position then is to have your frame upside down. But with the toothpick, I think you could make that a little easier just about either direction.
With the toothpick, it's easier any direction?
I'm sorry, with the Chinese grafting tool.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But with the toothpick, it's easier to turn it with the top bar down?
The top bar down, yes.
Yeah.
On the
Okay.
anything that, like the metal ones and the toothpick, you're actually kind of scooping it. And so in that sense, that angle.
Okay. I don't know if I'm ready to get frustrated by trying to use a toothpick this year, but we'll have to see. So after you get all your grafts done, then take your swarm box, and it's, you got your frames and everything. You got your 2 frames in there and all these nurse bees, and they're going to be crawling all over everywhere. So it's like if you'd had a package, you can lift that swarm box up just a little bit and give them a tap, bang it down on the surface from a couple inches up. And that's going to shake all of those bees down and get them away from the opening. Don't do this in the house. This picture's in the basement, but pretend it's out in the garage. I would take it on out just outside of the garage to do that and bang those bees down, slide that door, the top open, insert your frames in between both the nectar and pollen frames, just sandwich it in, pinch them together tight and close it up. And then I take mine downstairs to the basement. I have an unfinished basement that's really cool temperature wise in the spring. And I will leave those grafts down no longer than 36 hours. I have done 36 hours before when I used to work and only have one day off during the week as a nurse. I would graft on my day off, and then I would have to work the following day. And so sometimes I'd graft in the morning, but I couldn't get back and install my cells, transfer them from the cell starter to the cell finisher until I got home from work. So I was surpassing 24 hours, but I wouldn't go any longer than 36. 24 is ample. If you can work it on a weekend where you're off both days, that's fine. But I have gone as long as 36. And then my basement sometimes gets a little warmer than I like, and they generate a lot of heat. And so I know this is a summer increase in June or July because I can see the ice pack that's on the ground next to my swarm box, just to try to cool things down around them while they're there. So those nurse bees are queenless and they're broodless, and you've given them all the resources. So they just hop on those young larvae like crazy. And so when you go in the next day to pull that frame of grafts, you'll see that they've started to feed these larvae royal jelly. You can see them through the translucent cell cups there. And then they'll start to draw put fresh wax deposits on the end of those cells. And we consider that a take. When they start working those, you can see pretty much there may be some differences between now and when I check them 2 days from now in the finisher, but you can get a pretty good idea of how well they're being fed and how many that you're probably going to have successfully grafted just by looking at this. This is getting ready to be put into the cell finisher, which is going to be a queen right colony that you set up out in the backyard. And I should have said, I think I did already, but after you make that swarm box cell starter the day before, I want you to get back in that cell finisher that these cells are going to go into. And I want you to rotate your brood frames again. Look for any rogue queen cells in that cell finisher, because you built that cell finisher up so strong and to the point of swarming that you don't want to see any rogue queen cells getting started before you put your grafts in there. And so if you've got new eggs and larvae that's in the bottom box with the queen, you can rotate those up to the top box and so forth, and give her some open frames down below to lay in. So do a check of your cell finisher before you introduce these cells to the finisher. So next frame is my cell finisher. This particular one, I think, is only a 2 deep. When I took these pictures, I did a couple of different grafts this spring. I can't remember. I had a 3 deep and a 2 deep running. I think this is just a 2 deep configuration. I've got eggs and young larvae in the top box, and I've opened up a space that I'm going to put those grafted queen cells into. There is a queen excluder. You probably can't see it there, but I carefully bring that cell starter out to the yard, and try not to jostle it too much. And I'll open it up right in front of my cell finisher, and I'll take some extra water and I'll re-moisten those sponges and put them on as well, so that they have any moisture that they might need. We're not pollen deficient in Northeast Kansas, but you can add pollen sub at this time. We have too much natural pollen. They wouldn't even touch it. It'd be a waste of time. But in certain areas that are pollen deficient, you can even put pollen in this area at the time that you're putting in your grafted cells. I use a Man Lake wintering cover. It has deep side down for winter and the shallow side down for summer. I leave it in the winter configuration. It gives me enough space to put sponges and so forth. And then it has a feeder lid, a feeder hole already built in. I should have taken a picture from the front. There is another opening in the front of this for ventilation. It's made for if you poured a candy board. I usually will take that plastic disc out of that opening. I don't usually let them have an upper entrance. So I lots of times will screen that off, but it just allows for ventilation. And I wish I'd taken a picture from the front, but anyway, you need to feed this colony now with a 1-to-1 syrup. And like I said, just 3 holes in a jar, whether it be a quart jar or be a half. Oh, lovely. I didn't mute myself. A half gallon. Let me get rid of that. So continue to feed this colony, and then I'll come back in 2 days and check these cells again. And you can see how they're just feeding copious amounts of royal jelly to this larva in that picture on the right. The other ones that are that light green, those JZBZ cells are just fully filled with royal jelly, and they're continuing to draw out those queen cells with wax. So you can pretty much get a good idea on how many cells you're going to have, so that you can make, figure out how many nukes that you're going to make. Or sometimes I will have other beekeepers that come by and buy queen cells and install queen cells in their own splits that they make in their own yard. So it just gives me an idea on a number. We like to take pictures and share with each other to try to one up each other on who's got a better percentage of takes than the other. So don't procrastinate pulling your grafts. Usually you can pull them about 3 days prior to the queen emerging. And sometimes in the summertime, if you got 100-degree temperatures, the development of your queen can be a little quicker, and they can get ahead of you. And that queen can come out and she can go through and destroy all of these cells next to her, or she can choose to go down through the queen excluder and take out your queen in your cell finisher. So it's a mess. So I like to pull mine about 3 days before emergence and put them in the incubator. Don't shake the bees off of this frame. Take your brush and just gently brush the bees off of the frame. Don't shake these. And then you can go ahead and make your nukes, and you can install them if you don't have an incubator, or you can do like I do and put them in an incubator. I usually run mine 92 to 94 degrees. You can put a sponge, wet sponge, or a towel in there, adjust your humidity to 60 to 70% humidity. And then I support my cells in a vertical position. The left lower picture are test tube cell, foam test tube holders. And I use them to hold my cells upright. They were easy to come by before the pandemic. Now I'm finding a hard time finding those. You can make your own with foam, and I used, I think it was a 1/2-inch copper tubing to cut out holes. It was kind of painstakingly long to try to do that, but whatever that you can find to hold those cells in a vertical position. And then that just gives me another day or so to get my splits or to go from yard to yard. And it's got an adapter that I can plug it in the Jeep so that I can travel with these queen cells to the various yards and make splits and introduce queen cells. Or I've taken them to Kansas City before, done a lot of stuff. So installing, you could just use one queen cell per colony. I like to use two in case something happens with one, it doesn't doesn't hatch like it's supposed to. I put the cells side by side, so hopefully the one can get to her sister and kill her off when she emerges. Sometimes that doesn't always happen. The picture on the right, we have 2 successful emergence of queens. And so the only problem with that, you worry that your queens are going to duke it out and one might get injured in the coral enough that she can't take her mating flight. So that's always a risk. I like to see more the center picture at the bottom where you have 1 successful emergence and you can see where she chewed through and stung her sister. So that's a good emergence, what that should look like. I don't go into these colonies until 2 days after the queen is set to emerge. And I only go in to pull queen cells. I don't need to see the queen. I don't want to disturb the colony any more than I have to. I just wanted to know that I have a successful emergence of a queen. If I don't, sometimes you come back, you can have another round of grafts going about 4 days apart. And that works really well because you could just come right in with another set of cells, check for the rogue queen cell that they're probably rearing themselves and destroy it first. And you could reinstall and maybe even give them an extra shake of nurse bees if they're getting low in that regard. But usually at that point in time, it's not that bad. During this time of your placing your cells and the queen emerging, you want to have 1-to-1 syrup on them at that time. I don't have any recent pictures. I don't usually line my nukes up like this anymore. There's more risk of drift. This is more beekeeper convenience, but if you're gonna line nukes up, you need to have them different colors and stuff so your queen can identify which colony she's coming from so that she doesn't drift into the wrong colony when she returns from her mating flights. Now I usually space them out all over the yard and have the entrances in all different orientations, and you'll have a greater success with getting your queens mated. I have other big hives in the yard, so I only want 1 small entrance on these little nukes to keep the big colonies from picking on them. The tape over the holes, those are old Brushy Mountain nukes, and their inner covers had a space, a gap in that top. And I don't want them to have a top access because they can get robbed and stuff. So I just tape over the holes when I use the Brushy Mountains. But those top boxes are just surrounding a feeder like you see below there on the left is all they're doing. So the queen will emerge usually 1 to 2 days once we've installed her. She'll take mating flights, typically 5 to 7 days after that, and then begin to lay eggs 3 to 4 days later in the perfect world. But I don't really go in again other than when I pull the cells 2 days after emergence. I won't go in again until about 2 weeks. And then I'm checking for eggs. I tried this earlier, Robert. We'll see if we can screw this up. Don't get excited when you have a brand new queen that's really excited and wants to lay, and she may get a little exuberant. And so you may find, 2, 3, 4 eggs in a cell. We don't have laying workers here. We just have a queen and she doesn't have enough places to lay. So, if you've got an open, empty drawn comb frame that you can give her, you could put an extra one in. This was during a black locust flow. I just ended up putting a another box with 5 frames of foundation and had one drawn one in the center to pull them up. And they just, those new queens just came up and just hammered those frames that year when we were in a nectar flow. And I still kept the syrup on until the queen's back and laying, and then I can totally, I can pull that syrup off if we've got a really good flow. Otherwise, I may keep the syrup on for a while longer. So these are queens a little further along that have, you can, if you're going to sell queens, you can be able to, I like to be able to keep them, another 20 days or so, just so I can see their laying pattern. So I can show the customer, this is the nuke I'm pulling your queen from. This is what, this is how she's laying, so that they can see. Sometimes I have people want queens from me so fast that I don't have the opportunity to do that, and they just are willing to take them the minute they start to lay eggs. And I don't typically mark queens. I let the purchaser mark their queen. I don't want to change her in any way while they're trying to introduce her to a colony. So I usually won't mark queens that I'm selling. This year's Robert, this year's is yellow. So, if somebody wants their queen marked, I guess I can mark them for them. But I don't usually on my own that I graft. I give the person who's purchasing it after they have, introduced them. So in that case, you may need to, like I said, need some cages, the California cage, to cage up your queen once she's, back and is laying. So hopefully your head's not spinning by now in regards to remembering times to do things. We have tools, whether you use the wheel or you get a generated queen rearing calendar, that kind of helps you keep track of what you're supposed to do and when. The beeyard.org, you can input your date. Both of these are April 9th as a tentative graft date, and then it will put out this for you. And so I usually will print one. I don't know why the beeyard.org has 0 for the day of age for it should be a 1 next to the date where the eggs laid by the queen mother. But comparing it to the Ohio State beekeepers side by side, they still have emergence on the 21st, and then the other sensitive time period would be the 15th, 16th, 17th, which is a developmental phase. You don't want to be in there and messing with your queen cells during that time. But I really couldn't find a whole lot of difference between the two, even though they have that weirdness about 0 days old. But pick what works for you and just follow it. Like I said, if you just wanted to get your feet wet, I would just have you graft and install straight into a cell finisher if you don't want the expense of trying to do the swarm box. And I think you'll be surprised how well they even jump on those grafts if you would graft and put straight into a cell finisher. So questions? Am I under an hour, Jolie? Maybe, maybe not.
You are right at an hour. That's great. There were a few questions. I think Bob might have answered some of them.
I've got a question for you, Cheryl.
Yeah.
In your mating nuke, what do you put in it? Just sealed brood only, or when you put your cell in your mating boxes?
It's nice to have all capped because they're going to be, there as a workforce a lot quicker. But sometimes, you always will have an occasional open larva. You may have eggs. And I don't leave them queenless. Some people talk about making a split and leaving them queenless for 24 hours or something like that. I I make my split and install my cells pretty much either right away or within a few hours. So yeah, I have had brood in all phases. And I don't really have much problem with them. I don't use the queen cell protectors like a lot of people do, because they're going to attack them from the side if the colony wanted to try to destroy my queen cells. I haven't had much problem with that at all. With them accepting a queen cell, and even if there is egg or young larva in there. But
Okay.
I'm still going to be farther ahead with that cell, because she's going to be emerging in a day or two. Then,
Right.
And then when I go back in 2 days, if they've chewed and mashed both of them up, and that happens rare, but if it does, I can always come in with some more queen cells and cut out what they're working on.
And how many frames of brood do you put in?
Oh, on grafts, I make those a lot stronger than I would a traditional split. If I'm buying a mated queen in the spring, I would probably still go with a strong, just because the more downtime that you have, probably 3 frames of brood. And a lot of it's weather dependent too, Christy. If I'm doing summer increased nukes in June, I don't get as excited about it as I do in the spring, unless, a lot of it depends, it's a single colony by itself. You can also do splits above a double screen where they still would get the warmth from the colony below them. Then you could
Right.
probably get away with a few less, instead of a strong split with 3 frames of brood. If you were splitting above a double screen above the colony, if you're worried about your temperature type stuff,
Right. I mean, one year when I was raising queens, I had a problem with small hive beetle. This was like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was using 3 frames of brood of all ages.
Yeah. Yeah. I had one yard I had hive beetle in, and it wasn't a problem that early in April. It was one of my first grafts, but I left some of those colonies there. I didn't sell them, and I was gonna eventually move them to a yard and maybe convert them to a production colony for later on. And I kind of delayed, and I had 2 of them over there, and they were just so loaded with hive beetle that I brought them back to the house and I put them on the concrete driveway. And about every day or 2 days, I was banging out hive beetle and doing the stomp and everything, because I wasn't going to relocate them until I got on top of the hive beetle issue. But they were quite stressed. And yeah, if you have problems with hive beetle, that you don't want to have your mating nukes in those kind of areas, I learned from personal experience. So, but yeah, I usually tend to make splits a lot stronger when I'm introducing queen cells, just because of the downtime too.
Right.
Than if
Thanks.
I was doing a mated queen. Mhm.
Cheryl,
some
where,
of- Yeah, sorry, go
where are
ahead.
you located?
I'm in Barrington, which is just southeast of Topeka,
Okay,
2.5 miles east of Forbes Field.
okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
One of the questions is, do you have the bees clean the cups before you graft?
I do not. There's some people that'll put those in like a day before and let them clean them up. I use them straight out of the package.
And you might have answered this, I can't remember. Where did you buy the frame holder in the picture from?
Oh gosh. It might have been Daydaunt. It might have been Man Lake. I know Better Bee has it.
I think I got mine at Man Lake.
I was the reason I say Better Bee is because that's the only place I've been able to find that swarm
Yeah.
box. And
Maybe it was Kelly actually where I got mine, but they're
it's
out of
got the
business.
cell bar frame on page 33 of their 2022 catalog. But all of your queen, Daydaunt, Man Lake, those are the ones I usually buy from. Have it.
And someone said they'd like to see a webinar on covering queen rearing with a cloak board. And Bob talked about that. And then Bob says his queen cells are bigger than yours. Great pictures.
Of course.
And Megan said you can use a lip gloss maker, has the half-inch holes that the queen cells would fit in.
Huh, okay.
And then she asked how many queen cells you're putting in each nuke, but someone said, and you said 2, so she might have asked that before you said that. And then how do you know which queen is laying in the mating nuke with 2 emerged queens?
You don't.
The live one.
Yeah, the live one. That's that's right. Yeah, you're not going to have both of them come. I have not seen that, but I guess I should never say never, right, Jolie? But
Right.
usually they'll duke it out, and one will sting the other and kill her. I just worry that she gets injured and not able to take a mating flight because she's been quarreling with the queen. But usually they figure it out.
And then someone's asking if they can get the documents for the link for the documents for the queen, those queen timelines, those.
The one's on, let me go back. The one is on there at the very top.
Oh yeah, it was a bee club.
Susquehanna Valley. It's www.thebeeyard.org. It's listed right up there at the top on the right. Ohio State, I'm not sure. I looked on their site the other day. I don't know, Robert, were you able to pull one up? I don't know if Ohio State's is available. You can Google queen rearing calendar generator and probably find some.
I'm looking for the Ohio State one right now.
I use the Bee Yard most all the time. I just wanted to pull the Ohio State one for comparison, because it is kind of weird that they call that first day as the larva being 0 days old, but I don't know. It seems to still work out all the critical time periods. And you know, the queens are emerging on the 21st on both of them. I don't know, somebody smarter than me can maybe figure it out, but.
And then another question is, did you say queens can grow faster and emerge early if the temperature is higher outdoors? Just wanted to verify that I heard that.
Yeah. Bottom of the Ohio State beekeepers screen that I have on down at the very bottom. Queen emergence can vary depending on conditions, lower or higher temperatures, for example, speed up or slow down development. So I grafted summer increases. This is kind of a different philosophy. For most everybody, they're wanting to make splits in the spring and they're installing new queens in the spring. Some beekeepers have decided to look at things differently, where you make your splits more in our area in June. And then we raise those queens, keep them through the winter, and then they get broke down into production queens come spring. So if we graft our own, because we can't, get a grafted queen early enough in the spring. So we do what's called summer increases, and we split our strongest colonies after the main nectar flow or towards the end of the main nectar flow. And we can do grafts at that time and then winter those bees over. And to me, the ones that I do that are less likely to swarm on me in the spring than a full 2-year, second year queen. So I don't know. Nikki, are you on still?
Yes.
Do you find that if you do summer increases, do those queens want to swarm on you as much as some of the other ones?
Of course.
They all want to swarm?
Usually, yeah.
I don't find that my queens that I rear in June, late season, if they've got ample room and stuff, I don't find that they swarm on me as bad. So a lot of times the ones that I don't end up selling, I'll break down as production colony to a production colony in the spring, and they'll grow up quite nicely. So it's just a different way of looking at it. But
And both Matthew and Bob have put the link in for
okay.
how to get those. And then Dale Turner says, how long does it take a colony to start making their own queen when they are queenless?
If they have the resources, they'll know fairly quickly what, that's why I usually don't make my splits until I'm ready to install cells. And I've never had that much problem with them destroying the cells. So even if they would start queen preparations, that cell that I've put in is going to emerge and she's going to go through and clean house. Anything that they've started, she's going to break down in that small of a nuke.
And Sean bought those frames from Man Lake. Jackie Campbell wants to know how deep is the foam for the cells that you stuck them down in?
The depth isn't that important, but it's that cell holder probably is 3 inches or more. But I mean, it's a lot deeper than what the cell
What you need.
cell. I think the foam seat, I think I bought a foam seat cushion because I didn't want a whole bunch of foam. I think I bought a foam seat cushion for the first ones I made. And that was at Walmart. And that seat cushion probably was just 1.5 inches, if that.
Nikki says she uses the colored queen rearing dial. When she was starting, it helped her learn the queen development.
That bottom one,
I guess so.
something like that. They have a dial even in, that Successful Queen Rearing book. I looked for it and I just looked on Amazon and it must not be an Amazon, or I thought it was out of publication because they wanted like $70 for the darn thing. And I thought, there wasn't any more to get. So Becky loaned me hers so I could actually read Marla's course. And then I found it in Better Be. You can buy that book now through Better Be. I've seen it. So that book is available. And I highly recommend Larry Connor's Queen Rearing Essentials too. I have that book too, and also the Increased Essentials that he's written. But Marla Spivak, her book is available for $29.95 at Better Be. So, and it's got a wheel too, a queen rearing calendar wheel that you can put together too. So you can find others online. I had laminated one myself, and I've used a wheel before too. So
Another question, Katie wants to know if you made the frame holder that positions the frame at a slant with the eggs that you're grafting from.
you can buy those. It's called I think they're not listed like you'd think they were. I think they call them a larva transfer station. So if you're trying to Google it through Dadant's website or whatever, that's not, that's just, you don't need to have that. When I grafted in the first couple of years, it was propped against the crock bowl in the kitchen. So you don't need that fancy thing. It's just more expense. So.
A lot of thank yous. Mike, Becky, are you on? Okay, I just want to remind everyone that this is put on by the Kansas honey producers. And if you're interested, we have our state beekeeper meeting coming up on March 4th and 5th in Salina. And you can get information on our website at www.kansashoneyproducers.org. And I apologize to those who will view this later and weren't able to get on because the link was messed up. So sorry, we'll do better next time. So Bob, get the video out there pretty quick.
Congratulations on getting 500 people registered.
Well, it's you know, like certain people register every month, and so it's added up to 500 over the 8 months we've been doing this. Because I think next month is a year that we've been doing this, maybe April, I forget. But and someone wants to know if you can join our association. Yes, when you go to kansashoneyproducers.org, there's a link that you can join. And Cheryl's actually does our newsletter for the Kansas Honey Producers too. She does a great job. And you've had lots of thank yous and good job in the chat box, Cheryl. And this was a great presentation.
Yeah, I hope everybody will try it this spring. And you need a light source, you need to get a grafting tool, and just try and just skip the cell starter altogether and just insert them straight into the cell finisher and just see what happens. It's fascinating to see what bees can do. So raise a few queens yourself. Just try it.
Yeah, Robert says next month is selling at farmers markets and craft shows, and Stephanie Brown's doing that. And then and no one gave me any suggestions for the future, so I don't know. And then April is mentoring and concierge beekeeping, and Nikki's doing that. And May is making mead, and we have making mead and honey beer, but I think we'll do that. Making mead 1 month and making honey beer 1 month, because I don't think you do that together. Anyway, looking for other stuff. So anything else? Any other questions for Cheryl?
I'll stop sharing my screen here.
Oh, that's a good one. An online presence for your beekeeping. Okay.
Cheryl, you did a good job.
A
Thanks,
great
Christy.
job, yeah.
Yeah, if you haven't seen Christy's presentation this last month, that was really good too. Robert, is that on? Is that ready to watch too? Yeah, that was a great presentation. I enjoyed that one.
It's on, and I'll put a link here to the Kansas Honey Producers. It's under archives.
You did well, Cheryl.
Thanks.
Good job.